New York City thrived on anonymity. It was a place of fleeting glances on crowded sidewalks, of hurried mornings and restless nights, where people shared air but rarely pieces of themselves. Samantha Bennett knew this well. At 34 she had perfected the art of blending in, of keeping her life tidy and predictable. As a top-tier lawyer in one of Manhattan's most prestigious firms, her days were a series of neatly arranged time blocks, client meetings, court sessions, and late nights spent in her minimalist apartment with nothing but takeout and legal briefs for company. Her life was a perfectly curated routine. Every morning she drank the same black coffee from the same corner cafe, where the barista no longer asked for her name. She walked to her office at the same brisk pace, ignoring the street vendors and musicians that made the city hum with chaotic life. Her wardrobe was a sea of pressed slacks and pristine white blouses, as unyielding as the woman herself. Samantha Bennett did not stray from schedules. She did not make space for surprises. But surprises, as it turned out, had a way of finding her. It happened on an unassuming Thursday evening at an art gallery in Soho. Sam had been dragged there by a colleague under the pretense of networking. In truth, her presence had been more about appearances than anything else. She didn't care for photography. She didn't understand it. The walls were filled with black and white images of stark landscapes, shadowy buildings, and faces she couldn't quite decipher. People milled around her, sipping champagne and murmuring pretentious observations. Sam kept her hands clasped tightly behind her back, her face carefully blank as she studied a particularly abstract photograph of a half-empty room. "You look like you're trying very hard to hate this," a voice said beside her. Sam turned her head sharply, surprised by the intrusion. The woman who stood next to her was something out of place and yet perfectly at home. Isabel Cruz. Her name at that moment was a mystery, but her presence was unforgettable. Her dark hair fell in loose waves over her shoulders, framing a face that seemed built for laughter, soft angles, warm skin, and a mouth that curved into an easy, teasing smile. A camera hung loosely around her neck, its strap worn and faded, as though it had traveled through countless adventures. Her eyes, deep and dark, were fixed on Sam with playful curiosity. "I don't hate it," Sam replied defensively, her voice sharper than she intended. Isabel tilted her head, that smile widening just slightly. "No? Then why are you glaring at it like it owes you money?" Sam felt the corner of her mouth twitch, something dangerously close to a smile. "Maybe I'm just trying to figure out what the hell it's supposed to mean." "Meaning's overrated," Isabel said with a shrug. "It's about how it makes you feel. Right now." "Annoyed." Isabel laughed, a sound that was warm and rich, one that caught Sam off guard and left her feeling strangely breathless. "Well, mission accomplished. I'm Isabel, by the way." "Samantha." "Pleasure to meet you, Samantha," Isabel said, extending a hand. Sam hesitated only a moment before shaking it. Isabel's grip was firm, confident. "Let me guess. You're not here because you love photography." "I'm here because someone thought it was a good idea," Sam admitted dryly. "And you've been regretting it ever since," Isabel teased, her voice dancing on the edge of laughter. Sam opened her mouth to reply, but the words caught somewhere in her throat. There was something disarming about Isabel, the way she carried herself so effortlessly, like she didn't have to try to belong. For a woman like Sam, who spent every moment of her life trying to control every detail, Isabel was the embodiment of chaos. But it wasn't the kind of chaos that unraveled. It was the kind that pulled you in like the undercurrent of a wave you couldn't see coming. "Maybe I just don't know how to enjoy art," Sam said finally. "Or maybe," Isabel replied, her voice softening just a little, "you've forgotten how to let yourself feel something." The words landed harder than Sam wanted to admit. She looked back at the photograph on the wall, suddenly unsure what she was supposed to say. Isabel didn't press. She simply stood beside her, her presence light and unassuming, as though they had known each other far longer than a few minutes. The days that followed were unexpected in every possible way. Sam went back to her routine, convinced she would never see Isabel again. But New York, despite its enormity, had a strange way of pulling people together. Their second meeting happened at a small cafe near Central Park. Sam had been sitting at a corner table, her laptop open and her coffee cooling beside her. She had been immersed in a contract, so focused she almost didn't notice the soft click of a camera shutter. When she looked up, Isabel was standing just outside the window, her camera raised and a mischievous grin on her lips. Sam blinked, stunned. She pointed to herself as if to say, "Me?" Isabel nodded and waved, then disappeared inside. Moments later she slid into the chair across from Sam, uninvited but entirely welcome. "You looked too serious not to photograph," Isabel said, setting her camera gently on the table. Sam felt her cheeks heat. "That's invasive." "You looked beautiful," Isabel replied without hesitation. The words hung in the air, too heavy to be playful but too light to feel like a confession. Sam didn't know how to respond. No one had ever spoken to her like that, direct, open, unafraid. Isabel didn't just challenge her, she unraveled her one thread at a time. From then on, Isabel began to appear in Sam's world with the kind of spontaneity that both irritated and delighted her. She would text Sam on random afternoons, "Meet me at the corner of 5th and 81st. You won't regret it." Sam would show up reluctantly, only to find Isabel waiting with 2 coffees and a plan to wander through Central Park until dusk. On other nights, Isabel would show up outside Sam's building with takeout and a camera slung over her shoulder, dragging her out for late-night walks through Manhattan's quieter streets. Sam found herself laughing more than she had in years, real laughter that made her cheeks ache. Isabel was a force she hadn't prepared for, someone who didn't care for rules or appearances, someone who saw beauty in the messiness of life. "You're the most controlled person I've ever met," Isabel said one night as they sat on Sam's couch, sharing a bottle of wine. "Do you ever let yourself just be?" "I am being," Sam retorted, though even she didn't sound convincing. Isabel smiled, slow and knowing, before reaching out and tracing her finger lightly along Sam's jaw. "You're beautiful when you let go, you know that?" The words sent a shock through Sam, and for a moment, the only sound was the quiet ticking of the clock on the wall. Isabel leaned in slowly, giving Sam time to pull away if she wanted to. But Sam didn't. When their lips met, it was soft at first. A hesitant brush, a question, but it didn't stay that way. The kiss deepened, full of pent-up longing and unspoken promises. It was the beginning of something Sam hadn't known she was missing. Something dangerous and irresistible. Their romance unfolded like a secret, hidden from the world but burning brightly in the spaces only they shared. In the quiet of their apartments, away from the judging eyes of society and the rigid expectations of Sam's career, they found pieces of themselves they hadn't known existed. Isabel took pictures of Sam when she wasn't looking, capturing moments where her guard slipped, where she smiled freely or laughed until tears welled in her eyes. And Sam, for all her discipline and control, found herself falling. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and completely out of her hands. Isabel was light to Sam's dark, spontaneity to her rigidity. But beneath Isabel's laughter and carefree spirit, there was something else. Something Sam couldn't name. A secret that Isabel carried like a shadow. And though Sam didn't know it yet, that secret would soon change everything. The evening started innocently, as most turning points in life often do. The air in Isabel's apartment was soft and warm, scented faintly with lavender and the rich aroma of the tea they had shared earlier. Sam sat cross-legged on the floor, her posture unusually relaxed as the dim golden glow of a floor lamp bathed the small room in comfort. Around them, photographs, hundreds of them, sprawled like a mosaic of memories across the worn wooden floor. Sam ran her fingers across a glossy print, her eyes lingering on the captured moment. A couple laughing in the rain, their hair soaked but their smiles untouched by the storm. "You always capture the truth of people," Sam murmured, her voice soft with admiration. "Like, you don't just take pictures. You see something in them that no one else can." Isabel, sitting a few feet away with her knees pulled to her chest, smiled faintly. The corner of her mouth curved upward, but something in her expression shifted, as though Sam's words had touched a nerve she wasn't prepared to expose. "That's the point, isn't it?" Isabel said quietly, turning her camera over in her hands. The strap was frayed with age and frequent use, the edges worn smooth. "To see people. To see them as they are. I think sometimes we all need someone to do that for us." The room fell into a comfortable silence. Outside, the city murmured its nighttime song, car horns in the distance, muffled voices echoing through the streets below. Sam glanced at Isabel. She was bathed in shadow and light, her dark hair falling loosely over one shoulder, her eyes fixed intently on the camera in her lap. For a moment, Sam felt an ache, a realization of just how deeply she cared for this woman who had crept so effortlessly into her life. "This is nice," Sam said softly, breaking the quiet. Isabel looked up at her and the faint, almost imperceptible tension melted away. It is, she agreed, her voice barely above a whisper. They sat like that for a while, surrounded by scattered memories printed on glossy paper. Sam leaned over to pick up another photo, laughing lightly at an image of a cat sitting atop a wedding cake. You really do get everywhere, don't you? It's a gift, Isabel teased, her voice playful again. Sam smiled, her guard lowered in a way that was still unfamiliar, still fragile. She reached for another photo, this one a group of children playing on a sunlit street, their shadows elongated across the pavement. The next image showed a newlywed couple in a tight embrace, the bride's eyes closed as though she were savoring the moment. Each photo seemed to hold a sliver of someone's truth, and Sam couldn't help but marvel at the way Isabel could capture so much life in a single frame. But then she saw it. A photograph peeking out from beneath the pile, just the edge of it visible. It was older, the edges slightly frayed, the colors muted by time. Something about it snagged her attention like a splinter. Sam hesitated for only a moment before pulling it free. The image was simple. A group of teenagers sitting on the hood of an old car, laughing and carefree. The setting was rural, with tall trees silhouetted against the soft orange glow of a setting sun. The picture held a raw, unfiltered joy that made it seem alive even after so many years. And then she saw him. Her breath caught in her throat as her gaze zeroed in on one familiar face among the strangers. Lucas. Her brother. Sam's heart stopped. The world around her dimmed, everything narrowing to the photograph in her trembling hands. Lucas sat in the center of the group, his arm draped casually over the shoulder of a girl beside him. He was smiling. God, he was smiling. That same boyish grin, the one he always wore when he was about to say something ridiculous or pull off some prank. Sam hadn't seen that smile in over a decade, and the sight of it, so vivid, so unexpected, felt like a knife to her chest. She looked up, her voice tight and trembling. Why do you have this photo? The question came out sharper than she intended, but she couldn't stop it. Isabel froze. The warmth in her face drained instantly, her dark eyes flicking to the photograph in Sam's hand. For a moment she said nothing, but the silence itself was an answer. Thick, suffocating, and wrong. Isabel, Sam said again, this time more forceful, more desperate. Why do you have this? Isabel's throat worked as she swallowed. She didn't meet Sam's eyes. Sam. The way she said her name, soft, pleading, only made it worse. You knew him, Sam whispered, the realization landing like a thunderclap. Her hand tightened around the photo, crumpling the edge. You knew him. Isabel looked up finally, her face pale, her eyes glassy with emotion. I didn't want you to find out like this. Sam's chest constricted, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in on her. You knew him and you didn't tell me? I didn't know how, Isabel said softly, her voice raw. Sam, please. When? Sam's voice broke as she cut Isabel off. When did you know him? Isabel hesitated, the silence dragging between them like a blade. And then she spoke, her voice trembling. I was there, the day he died. The words hit Sam like a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. The photograph slipped from her fingers, landing face up on the floor. Her brother's smile mocked her, frozen forever in a moment that no longer felt innocent. You were there. Sam repeated numbly, her mind struggling to catch up with her heart. The day Lucas died? Sam, please, Isabel said, her voice breaking. She moved closer, reaching out, but Sam stepped back as though burned. It was an accident. I was just a teenager. I didn't know. Don't, Sam snapped, her voice cracking. Tears stung her eyes, her vision blurring. Don't you dare stand there and tell me it was an accident. You knew and you kept it from me. How could you keep something like that from me? Isabel flinched, her own tears welling, but she didn't move. I was scared. I thought I'd lose you. You already have, Sam said harshly, her voice hollow. The silence that followed was unbearable. Isabel's shoulders sagged as she sank to her knees, her head bowed. Sam couldn't look at her. Couldn't look at the photograph. The walls of Isabel's apartment, the place that had felt so warm, so safe, seemed unfamiliar now, as though Sam had stepped into a stranger's life. I need to go, Sam said finally, her voice barely audible. Sam. Isabel tried to rise, but Sam turned sharply, tears spilling down her face. Don't follow me. She didn't wait for a response. She didn't look back. Sam grabbed her coat and fled, her footsteps echoing through the building's stairwell like thunder. Outside, the cold night air hit her like a slap, but it wasn't enough to stop the pain tearing through her chest. The world around her blurred, street lights and headlights, the hum of the city drowned out by the rush of blood in her ears. Lucas. Isabel. The two pieces of her life that were never supposed to intersect had collided violently, shattering everything she thought she knew. And as Sam walked into the night, her heart aching and her trust broken, Isabel sat alone on the floor of her apartment, the photograph still lying between them like a ghost neither could escape. The days that followed were a blur of anguish, silence, and sleepless nights. For Samantha Bennett, everything that had felt solid in her life had crumbled into dust. She sat at her desk at the firm, the windows of her office offering a clear view of New York's skyline, but the city felt like it had nothing left to give her. It loomed cold and detached, a reflection of her own hollow interior. Work had always been her escape, the thing that grounded her when nothing else could. And so, Sam buried herself in it with ruthless determination. She spent hours at the office, pouring herself into cases that once filled her with purpose, but now her work felt mechanical, hollow victories measured only by billable hours. The legal briefs she read blurred together, words swimming uselessly on the page. Every now and then, her gaze would drift to the corner of her desk, where the picture of Lucas used to sit, smiling back at her. She had shoved it into a drawer the morning after she left Isabel's apartment, unable to bear the weight of it. Lucas. His name haunted her every thought. The memories of her older brother were sharp and vivid now, as though his laughter, his voice, his presence had been hiding in her subconscious all these years, waiting for an opening. She remembered the way he used to ruffle her hair when she was a kid, the way he made her feel safe even when their parents argued late into the night. He had been the golden boy, charming, reckless, and fearless in ways Sam had never been. And then in one day he was gone. Her grief had been quiet back then, controlled. She had thrown herself into her studies, into her need for order and precision, because chaos had already taken enough from her. But now Isabel's confession had ripped those wounds open. Sam felt betrayed, not just by Isabel but by herself for having let her walls down, for allowing herself to love someone who carried such a terrible connection to her pain. At night the loneliness was unbearable. Sam would sit on the edge of her bed, staring at the shadows on her bedroom wall as the city outside hummed with life. Her apartment, usually a sanctuary of order, felt like a prison. Sometimes she would close her eyes and see Isabel, her warm, teasing smile, the softness in her dark eyes, the way she had touched Sam's face that night before they kissed for the first time. Those memories felt cruel now, like a dream she had no right to hold on to. Isabel, meanwhile, was drowning in her own torment. Her apartment was no longer the warm, safe space it had once been. The scattered photographs that surrounded her now felt like accusations, proof of her failure to tell Sam the truth when it mattered most. She had spent years carrying the weight of Lucas's death, years of believing that no one could ever understand the shame and guilt she felt. But seeing the look on Sam's face that night, the betrayal, the anguish, had been worse than any punishment Isabel had imagined for herself. She hadn't touched her camera since Sam left. The old Nikon sat untouched on her table, its lens cap still in place. Isabel couldn't bear to pick it up, to try to find beauty in a world that felt so impossibly broken. Instead, she sat on her couch for hours at a time, her mind looping through memories like a broken film reel. 15 years ago. The party. Isabel had been just a girl then, 17, rebellious, angry at a home life that had already crumbled. She remembered sneaking out that night, slipping into a friend's car and ending up at a house on the edge of a lake. She hadn't known most of the people there, but it hadn't mattered. The music was loud, the air was electric, and the drinks flowed freely. Lucas had found her sitting alone on the porch, a girl with dark hair and defiant eyes trying to look tougher than she felt. "You're too young to look this serious," Lucas had said with that easy grin of his, leaning against the railing beside her. Isabel had rolled her eyes, but she couldn't help smiling. Lucas had a way about him, an ability to disarm people to make them feel seen. He had sat with her, talking and joking until she felt lighter than she had in months. When the group decided to take the boat out onto the lake later that night, she had gone with them, laughing and reckless in the way only teenagers could be. And then the storm had come. The details after that were blurry, Flashes of lightning across the water, the boat rocking violently, people screaming. Isabel had been thrown overboard. She remembered hitting the water hard, the freezing cold shocking her lungs as she fought to stay afloat. And then there was Lucas. Lucas pulling one of the other kids up beside him, his face strained with effort as the storm raged around them. Isabel had watched helplessly as the boat capsized, as Lucas disappeared beneath the waves. She had screamed his name until her throat was raw, but the storm had swallowed everything. She had never forgiven herself for surviving when Lucas hadn't. She had taken a single photograph that night, moments before the accident. A blurry shot of Lucas laughing with his friends, caught in a beam of porch light. It had been the last time she saw him alive, and she had carried that photo like a wound, never showing it to anyone. Now, as Isabel sat in her dark apartment, her hands trembling, she finally realized she couldn't keep hiding. It was a week later when Sam found the envelope on her desk. She had been in the middle of a meeting when her assistant quietly dropped it off. It was plain, no name or address, but Sam knew instantly who it was from. The handwriting on the front, slanted and delicate, made her pulse quicken. She dismissed the meeting as quickly as possible, shutting the door to her office before tearing the envelope open with shaky hands. Inside was a letter, handwritten on lined paper, and a single photograph. Sam's breath caught as she unfolded the photo. It was Lucas. He was standing with a group of kids, his arms slung around a girl Sam realized was Isabel. The photo was blurry and imperfect, but Lucas's smile was unmistakable, bright and alive, a boy who still believed the world was good. Sam's fingers trembled as she turned to the letter. Sam, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know the truth. I didn't go to that party because I wanted to. I went because I had nowhere else to be. I was angry, lost, and Lucas, he saw me. He made me laugh that night when I thought I'd forgotten how. I didn't know him well, but I remember thinking he was the kind of person who left the world better than he found it. I was there when the storm came. I was on that boat. I tried to hold on, but I couldn't save him. I never could. I've spent years replaying it in my mind, trying to make it different, trying to atone for something I couldn't change. I kept that photo because it was the last time I saw someone truly alive, truly happy. I should have told you, Sam. I should have told you from the start. But losing you scared me more than anything else. I love you. I think I've loved you since the moment you glared at that photograph in the gallery. But I understand if you can't forgive me. Isabel. Sam read the letter over and over, tears streaking her face. She held the photo of Lucas in her hands, her heart aching at the sight of him, the boy who had been gone for so long. For the first time she realized Isabel hadn't been the villain in this story. She had been a girl, just a girl, caught in a moment of chaos that no one could control. Forgiveness wouldn't come easily. The hurt still sat heavy in her chest. But as Sam traced her brother's face in the photograph, she felt something shift inside her, something that whispered of hope. And for the first time in weeks she let herself think of Isabel, not with anger but with longing. The question was no longer whether she could forgive Isabel. The question was whether she was ready to let herself love again. The days stretched endlessly after Isabel's letter. Sam carried it with her, folded and creased, a tangible weight in her pocket. It wasn't that she couldn't stop reading it, it was that she couldn't let go of it. Late at night she would sit in the armchair by her window, the city a blur of light and noise outside, and read Isabel's words over and over. I love you. Those 4 words had an impossible softness to them, tender yet edged with pain. They struck a chord in Sam that she didn't know was still capable of vibrating. Forgiving Isabel felt like standing at the edge of a precipice, the wind pulling her forward, daring her to trust the fall. Trust her. It took days, too many sleepless nights and countless cups of untouched coffee, for Sam to summon the strength to decide. She left work early that day, walking out of the office with an unfamiliar determination. She didn't call ahead. She didn't send a message. Instead she went to Isabel's studio. The building was tucked between others on a quiet street in Brooklyn. The sun was low in the sky as she arrived, casting long shadows that stretched across the sidewalks and painted the world in hues of orange and gold. It felt fitting. A sunset, the symbolic end of one chapter and the beginning of something new. Sam stood at the door for a long moment, hesitating, her fingers hovering near the handle. But then she pushed it open, and the soft chime of the bell above the door greeted her like a whisper. Inside, the studio was bathed in golden light. It spilled through the enormous windows that lined the back wall, streaking across the hardwood floor and dust-specked air. The space was still, silent save for the muffled hum of the city outside. Photographs lined the walls, frames of every size scattered in a curated chaos that was undeniably Isabel. And there she was. Isabel sat on the ledge of the window, her knees pulled up to her chest and her arms wrapped loosely around them. The light touched her dark hair, turning it molten black and softening the sharp angles of her face. She looked smaller, somehow, fragile in a way that Sam had never seen before. She didn't turn when Sam entered, but her voice broke the silence. "I'm not going to ask you to forgive me," Isabel murmured. Her words were steady, but there was a tremor just beneath them, like a thread threatening to snap. "Because I know I might not deserve it. I need you to know I never wanted to hurt you." Sam stepped deeper into the room, her shoes soft against the wooden floor. For a long moment she said nothing. She watched Isabel as she sat in the window, staring out at the dying sun, her profile etched in light and shadow. It reminded Sam of a photograph, one of those candid moments Isabel loved to capture, full of unguarded truth. Finally Sam spoke. Her voice was quiet but clear. "I've spent years blaming the world for what happened to Lucas," she said, each word deliberate, heavy. "I buried it so deep because I didn't want to face it. I didn't want to feel it again." Isabel turned slightly, her eyes lifting to meet Sam's. They were soft, wounded, but there was hope there too, faint and fragile like the first light of dawn. Sam took a slow step forward. "But I never thought about what it must have been like for the people who were there, for the people who had to live with it the way I did." She paused, exhaling shakily. "I didn't think about you." Isabel blinked, her lips parting as though she wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Sam moved closer until she stood just in front of her, the space between them heavy with the weight of everything unsaid. The golden light reflected in Isabel's eyes, making them glimmer like dark water. Sam reached out slowly, hesitantly, and touched Isabel's hand. Her skin was warm beneath Sam's fingertips, but Isabel didn't pull away. "Maybe it's time to stop running," Sam said softly, her voice breaking slightly. "Maybe it's time for both of us to stop." Isabel's breath hitched, a tear slipping down her cheek. She stared at Sam, searching her face as though trying to understand the moment, trying to believe it. "Do you mean that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Sam nodded. "I don't know how to forgive you yet. And I don't know how to forgive myself for blaming you. But I do know I don't want to lose you." Isabel's face crumpled, and before Sam could say anything else, Isabel threw her arms around her, holding her tightly. Sam stiffened at first, surprised by the suddenness of it, but then she melted into the embrace, wrapping her arms around Isabel and burying her face against her shoulder. The smell of Isabel, lavender, faint hints of coffee, was familiar and comforting. Neither of them said anything as they held each other. The silence was heavy, but this time it wasn't full of secrets. It was full of possibility. The weeks that followed were slow, careful. Sam and Isabel didn't dive headfirst back into what they had been. Instead, they built something new. Sam found herself visiting the studio more often, sitting on the floor while Isabel worked on her photos. Sometimes they talked, quiet conversations about Lucas, about that night, about what it had meant for both of them. Other times they sat in silence, content just to share the same space. Forgiveness was not instant. Some nights, Sam would still wake in the dark, her chest tight, the image of Lucas haunting her. Isabel gave her space when she needed it, always patient, never pressing. For her part, Isabel began to photograph again, tentative at first, as though she were afraid the camera would betray her. But the light started to return to her eyes, little by little. It all culminated with the announcement of Isabel's new exhibition. The gallery was packed that evening, a quiet hum of voices filling the air as people moved between the frames on display. Sam entered the room with hesitant steps, her chest tight with nerves. She hadn't seen Isabel yet, but she could feel her presence in every photo on the walls. The collection was stunning, raw, honest, filled with quiet beauty. Some images were bright and joyous. Couples in parks, children chasing pigeons through fountains, sunrises over the Brooklyn Bridge. Others were heavy with melancholy, old hands intertwined, empty benches, rain-soaked windows. And then Sam saw it, the centerpiece of the exhibition. It was a silhouette of two women, standing hand in hand against the golden glow of the setting sun. The skyline of New York stretched out before them, a city both vast and intimate, endless and close. The photo was breathtaking, simple yet profound. Beneath it, a caption in small, unassuming letters read, "Sometimes the truth hurts, but love heals." Sam felt her throat tighten as she stared at it. She knew what it meant. "Do you like it?" The voice came softly from behind her, and Sam turned to see Isabel standing there, her dark eyes fixed on her with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Sam looked back at the photograph, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I do," she said quietly. "It's beautiful." Isabel stepped closer. "I wasn't sure you'd come." Sam turned to face her fully, her heart pounding in her chest. "I didn't think I would. But I'm glad I did." Isabel held her gaze, searching her face for something unspoken. Then after a long moment she whispered, "Do you still want to keep this a secret?" Sam's lips curved into a genuine, soft smile. "No," she replied, her voice steady and certain. "Some things are too good to hide." Isabel exhaled a soft laugh, her smile breaking through the walls she had carried for so long. Sam reached for her hand and Isabel squeezed it gently as though anchoring herself to this moment, this truth. They walked out of the gallery together, the hum of the city wrapping around them like an old friend. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. But it was real. And for the first time in a long time Sam believed that was enough.